The vast, indifferent expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. A silent, unseen war rages beneath its surface, a struggle for survival that will determine the fate of nations. 7 out of every 10 men who embark on this terrifying journey will never return. This is the brutal reality of the German U-boat arm in World War II. They are the hunters and the hunted, in a conflict that will push human endurance to its absolute limits. But what kind of leader commands men into such a maelstrom, knowing the odds are so stacked against them? Born on September 16, 1891, in Grunau, near Berlin, Germany, Karl Donitz enters the Kaiserliche Marine, the Imperial German Navy, in 1910. His early career sees him serve on light cruisers in the Mediterranean during World War I. By 1916, Karl Donitz requests a transfer to the burgeoning submarine forces, a decision that will define his life and shape a global conflict. He commands the U-boat UC-25 and later UB-68, operating in the Mediterranean. It is during this period, after being captured by the British in October 1918 when his U-boat suffers technical difficulties, that Karl Donitz begins to formulate a revolutionary concept for submarine warfare: the Rudel tactic, or Wolfpack tactic. He envisions U-boats operating in coordinated attack groups rather than independently, believing this strategy will be more efficient against the Allied convoy system. After World War I, with Germany forbidden from possessing submarines by the Treaty of Versailles, Karl Donitz remains in the drastically reduced German Navy, secretly working to build a new U-boat force. By 1935, he is appointed chief of the submarine force, tasked with reconstituting Germany's U-boat arm. On October 1, 1939, as World War II begins, Karl Donitz is promoted to Konteradmiral, or Rear Admiral, and assumes the critical role of commander of the submarines, known as Befehlshaber der Unterseeboot, BDU. He inherits a fleet of only 56 U-boats, with just 24 suitable for operations in the vast Atlantic. Against the formidable might of the Royal Navy and its allies, this small force is a distinct underdog, yet Karl Donitz believes it holds the key to Britain's defeat. The challenges facing Karl Donitz and his U-boat arm are immense. The German High Command, particularly Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, the commander-in-chief of the Navy, does not initially favor submarine warfare, instead aspiring to a grand surface fleet. Dönitz, however, firmly believes that a large surface fleet is unnecessary and that U-boats alone can defeat Britain by strangling its vital sea lanes. His calculations suggest that a fleet of 300 medium Type 7 U-boats could sink 1 million tons of shipping per month, enough to cripple the British economy within a year. Yet, at the war's outset, he commands only a fraction of this number. The early days of the war are fraught with difficulties. Torpedo failures plague commanders, diminishing the effectiveness of attacks against convoys. Coordinating Wolfpack operations proves difficult in 1939, and several U-boats are lost en route to the Atlantic through the North Sea or the heavily defended English Channel. The vastness of the Atlantic, coupled with the Royal Navy's established anti-submarine warfare (ASW) capabilities and the convoy system, presents a formidable barrier. The British, having refined convoy tactics in World War I, understand the critical importance of protecting their merchant shipping. Despite these early setbacks and the skepticism from some within the German naval hierarchy, Karl Donitz is granted considerable operational freedom for his rank. He pushes tirelessly for increased funding and production of U-boats, convinced that only a sufficient number of submarines can truly implement his Wolfpack strategy effectively. No one initially believes it is possible for such a relatively small force to threaten the very lifeline of a global empire. They are about to be proven catastrophically wrong. The sheer scale of the task, to sever the arteries of an island nation dependent on seaborne trade, appears insurmountable. As 1939 gives way to 1940, Karl Donitz's U-boat arm begins to find its rhythm. From September to December 1939, U-boats sink 221 ships totaling 755,237 gross tons, at the cost of 9 U-boats. Only 47 of these merchant ships, representing 249,195 tons, are sunk in the North Atlantic. The real turning point arrives after the fall of France in June 1940. With German control of the French Atlantic coast, U-boats gain direct access to the ocean, and powerful land-based radio transmitters become available, enabling Dönitz to coordinate his wolf packs more effectively across the Atlantic. The first happy time begins in mid-1940. U-boat commanders, operating from newly acquired bases in France, target convoys with devastating effect. In May 1940, 101 ships are sunk, though only 9 in the Atlantic. By June, this number rises to 140 ships sunk, 53 of them in the Atlantic, totaling 585,496 gross tons. The first 6 months of 1940 cost Dönitz 15 U-boats. The Wolfpack tactic, or *Rudel tactic*, involves a patrol line of 6 to 10 U-boats, later expanding to 20 or even 30, stretched across known convoy routes. When one U-boat spots a convoy, it shadows it, transmitting coordinates to the others, allowing the pack to gather and launch a coordinated, simultaneous attack, often at night, overwhelming the escorts. The British, reliant on the convoy system, struggled to adapt to this new, coordinated threat. Their escort vessels are often too few and lack the necessary speed and range to counter the multiple attackers. Depth charges are the primary anti-submarine weapon, but effectively targeting a submerged U-boat without precise location data is challenging. By early 1941, the Battle of the Atlantic escalates dramatically. In March 1941, U-boats sink 243,020 gross tons of shipping, with total Allied losses from all causes reaching 474,879 tons, at a cost of 5 U-boats. May 1941 sees U-boats sink 325,492 tons, part of a total Allied loss of 486,796 tons, with only 1 U-boat lost. This relentless attrition pushes Britain to the brink. What does it tell you about a man that he continued to send his sailors into such peril, knowing the high cost, yet believing it was the only path to victory? Tell me in the comments. With the United States entering the war in December 1941, Karl Donitz immediately launches Operation Paukenschlag, or drumbeat, marking the second happy time for his U-boat crews. This offensive targets unescorted shipping along the unprepared American East Coast and in the Caribbean. Only 5 long-range Type 9 U-boats are initially available for this operation. From January to July 1942, these U-boats achieve unprecedented success, sinking more ships and tonnage than at any other time in the war. During this second happy time, U-boats sink approximately 455 ships, including many vital tankers, operating up to 300 miles off the U.S. eastern seaboard. These sinkings total 196,243 tons in January, 286,613 tons in February, 354,489 tons in March, 276,131 tons in April, 451,991 tons in May, and 416,843 tons in June. In total, 868 ships, representing 3.1 million tons, are lost to U-boats between January and August 1942, while only 42 German U-boats are lost. This period represents one of the greatest naval disasters for the Allies. The geographical scope of U-boat operations expands dramatically. While the North Atlantic remains the primary battleground, Dönitz also dispatches U-boats to more distant, less defended waters, including the West African coast and the South Atlantic. In Washington, D.C., Admiral Ernest Kane, Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Fleet, faces mounting pressure. Reports stream in of merchant ships being sunk within sight of the American coast, their burning wrecks visible from shore. The initial response from the U.S. Navy is to deploy individual patrols, believing convoys are too slow and would present larger targets. They confidently announce that many U-boats would never return, but details of U-boat sinkings are not released to avoid aiding the Germans. Throughout the summer and early autumn of 1942, there is no attempt to organize convoys, and coastal towns remain lit at night, silhouetting ships against the glow. Naval intelligence estimates suggest U-boats are operating singly, making wolfpack tactics seem less likely. The sheer audacity of the German attacks, so close to American shores, catches them off guard. They are convinced that with their vast resources, they can hunt down individual submarines. This miscalculation, fueled by a reluctance to adopt the British-proven convoy system, allows the American shooting season to continue for months, costing hundreds of ships and thousands of lives. By February 1941, as sinking results in the North Atlantic diminish somewhat due to improved Allied defenses, Karl Donitz decides to send Type 9 U-boats to operate in the South Atlantic, predominantly off Freetown, Sierra Leone. These submarines make use of secret replenishment points in the Central Atlantic, allowing them to undertake successive patrols without returning to bases in the Bay of Biscay, which can be as distant as 2,800 miles. This system of double patrols proves effective, with 7 U-boats sinking more than 74 ships in the first half of 1941. U-69, under Lieutenant Metzler, travels south along the African coast, mining the ports of Lagos and Takoradi in the Gulf of Guinea, causing the British Admiralty to temporarily close these ports. In October 1942, a significant U-boat offensive, Group Icebar, Group Polar Bear, is launched, comprising 4 Type IXD-2 U-boats and a fueling vessel. Their objective? To attack merchant shipping off Cape Town, South Africa, a route considered vulnerable and critical for war supplies from India to Britain. On October 4, 1942, British Royal Navy intelligence notes German submarines moving south towards Cape Town but fails to report it, leaving South African defenses completely unaware. The German Wolfpack, arriving off Cape Town, sinks 14 ships within 3 days. U-504 begins operations off Cape Town on October 17, then moves up the east coast of South Africa, sinking the Empire Chaucer. On October 23, the city of Johannesburg is sunk off East London, and on October 26, U-504 sinks the U.S. ship Anne Hutchinson. By the end of December 1942, Operation Icebar alone accounts for an estimated 310,864 tons of shipping sunk. In total, German U-boats off the South African coast will account for 114 Allied merchant ships sunk, with an accumulated loss of 667,593 tons between 1941 and 1945. The pressure on Allied merchant seamen is immense. They face the constant threat of torpedoes, the terror of their ships breaking apart, and the agonizing wait in lifeboats in the vast, cold ocean. Over 30,000 men of the British Merchant Navy alone are lost between 1939 and 1945, a fifth of its pre-war strength. They are frontline warriors, yet many wear no uniform and have no memorial. If you had been a merchant sailor, knowing the terrifying odds, would you have continued to sail? Tell me in the comments. By January 1943, Karl Donitz is appointed Grand Admiral and replaces Erich Raeder as Commander-in-Chief of the entire German Navy, while retaining his command of the U-boat arm. This promotion reflects Hitler's growing confidence in Dönitz and the undeniable impact of the U-boat campaign. However, the tide is beginning to turn. The Allies are rapidly improving their anti-submarine warfare (ASW) capabilities. The convoy system is fully implemented, with fast convoys often zigzagging to complicate targeting, and slower convoys steaming straight ahead. New technologies like advanced sonar, ASDIC, radar, long-range patrol aircraft, and improved depth charges such as Hedgehog and Squid are deployed. The development of high-frequency direction finding, HF/DF, known as HUF-DUF, allows Allied forces to pinpoint U-boat radio transmissions, enabling escorts to close in on wolfpacks before they can attack. The decryption of the U-boat fleet's Triton, Cypher, and Enigma variant provides crucial intelligence about U-boat movements and intentions. The year 1943 becomes known as Black May for the U-boats. In May 1943 alone, 34 U-boats are sunk. Facing catastrophic losses, Karl Donitz makes the difficult decision on May 24, 1943, to call his forces back from the North Atlantic. The initiative in the Battle of the Atlantic shifts decisively to the Allies. The U-boats are no longer the unchallenged predators, they are now the hunted. Despite this setback, Dönitz refuses to concede. He orders his submarines to return to the ocean, albeit with a diminished impact. He introduces and advocates for advanced submarine technologies, most notably the snorkel, which permits shallow-depth operation of diesel engines, saving battery power and extending underwater endurance. This allows U-boats to operate in coastal waters and even rest on the bottom, rising only to attack. However, these innovations have little tangible effect on regaining the initiative from the Allies. U-boat operations off the South African coast continue, though with increasing difficulty. By the end of March 1943, anti-submarine warfare in South African waters becomes so efficient that U-boat wolfpacks manage to sink only a small number of Allied shipping. Eventually, due to negligible sinking results and the loss of several U-boats, Dönitz orders German submarines to other operational areas. The focus shifts to individual boats making snap attacks in focal areas, relying on stealth rather than overwhelming numbers. The sheer scale of human loss on both sides is staggering. Of the approximately 40,000 men who serve in the German U-boat arm, around 30,000 perish, a casualty rate of about 75%. Of the 1,149 U-boats that enter service, 711 are lost in combat or accidents. 429 U-boats are lost with no survivors, and 215 are lost on their first patrol. On the Allied side, 3,500 merchant ships, 14.5 million gross tons, and 175 Allied warships are sunk. Over 70,000 Allied naval and merchant seamen lose their lives. Which side of this brutal, protracted struggle do you think history remembers most vividly, and why? Tell me in the comments. The year is 1944. The Allied invasion of Europe is imminent. Despite the massive shift in the Battle of the Atlantic, Karl Donitz, from his headquarters, continues to drive his U-boat arm to inflict what damage it can. He knows the war on land is lost, but the U-boat war, he believes, must continue to tie up Allied resources and relieve pressure on other fronts. He pours resources into developing advanced U-boats like the Type 21 Electro boat, which can operate faster and longer underwater, making them far harder to detect. But these technological marvels arrived too late to turn the tide. It is early 1945. Allied convoys, now heavily escorted by destroyers, frigates, and escort carriers, ply the waters with increasing confidence. Long-range aircraft, equipped with radar, relentlessly patrol the skies, their presence a constant threat to any U-boat forced to surface. The U-boats are forced into a desperate struggle, often operating individually in shallow coastal waters around the United Kingdom and off the east coast of Canada and the United States, seeking opportunities for snap attacks. They rest on the bottom, rising only to fire a torpedo when alerted by the sound of an approaching convoy, then immediately executing extreme evasive maneuvers. In January 1945, the First Sea Lord of the Admiralty warns that the high shipping losses which may occur during the first half of 1945 may well prejudice the maintenance of our forces in Europe. This statement, despite the overwhelming Allied advantage, underscores the persistent, if diminishing, threat posed by Dönitz's U-boats. The psychological impact of the unseen enemy remains potent. On May 7, 1945, with Germany in ruins and Adolf Hitler dead, Karl Donitz, whom Hitler had named his successor as head of state, assumes the mantle of leadership. His first and most critical act is to negotiate Germany's unconditional surrender to the Allies. On May 8, 1945, the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous campaign of World War II, officially ends. Dönitz orders all U-boats to cease hostilities and surrender. The surviving U-boats, some 156 of them, surface and sail into Allied ports, their crews somber, their war finally over. 221 U-boats are scuttled by their own crews. This moment marks the final, brutal end of Karl Donitz's U-boat war, a campaign that nearly brought Britain to its knees but ultimately cost Germany an unimaginable price in men and machines. What does it tell you about a man that he made the choice to surrender with everything to lose? Tell me in the comments. The Battle of the Atlantic, orchestrated for much of its duration by Karl Donitz, remains the longest continuous military campaign of World War II, lasting from September 1939 to May 1945. Donitz's innovative, Wolfpack tactics fundamentally changed naval warfare, demonstrating the devastating potential of coordinated submarine attacks against convoys. His U-boats sank more than 3,500 Allied merchant vessels, totaling over 13.5 million tons, and 175 Allied naval vessels. These losses were a constant, existential threat to Britain's survival. However, the cost to the German U-boat arm was catastrophic. Of the approximately 40,000 men who served, 30,000 lost their lives, a staggering 75% casualty rate, the highest of any branch of service for any major combatant in World War II. 784 U-boats were lost to enemy action or other causes out of 1,156 built. Dönitz himself suffered personally, losing both of his sons while they served in the German Navy. The Battle of the Atlantic spurred immense technological advancements in anti-submarine warfare, including sophisticated sonar, radar, long-range aircraft, and new weapons like Hedgehog. It also highlighted the critical importance of intelligence gathering, particularly the breaking of the Enigma code, which provided the Allies with invaluable insights into U-boat movements. The Allied convoy system, initially struggled against, ultimately proved decisive, reducing losses dramatically once fully implemented and effectively defended. Less than 30% of merchant vessels sunk by submarines were torpedoed while sailing in convoy, while 60% were unescorted. Karl Donitz was arrested on May 23, 1945, and later tried at the Nuremberg trials. He was convicted of war crimes and crimes against peace, specifically for ordering unrestricted submarine warfare, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He served his full sentence and was released in 1956, living out the rest of his life quietly in Almuel, near Hamburg, until his death on December 24, 1980. Despite the brutal nature of his command, Karl Donitz remained a dedicated naval officer, committed to his strategy even as the war turned against Germany. His legacy is complex, intertwined with the atrocities of the Nazi regime, yet his tactical brilliance in U-boat warfare is undeniable. The U-boat arm, despite its ultimate defeat, tied up immense Allied resources and caused unparalleled destruction, nearly achieving its goal of starving Britain into submission. An unexpected fact remains that after Hitler's suicide, Karl Donitz was, for 23 days, the last head of state of Nazi Germany. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: unbroken. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.